Good evening and welcome to this committee meeting of the Licensing Committee on the 14th of June 2023. My name is Councillor Michelle Burrows for Wivenhoe Ward and I'll be chairing this meeting this evening, substituting for Councillor Dave Harris. To begin the meeting, there are a few matters of housekeeping. The action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm does sound, please evacuate the Town Hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the Town Hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being recorded for live broadcast over the internet via the Council's YouTube channel and will also be available to view afterwards. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone as this activates the audio recording. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly. Set them to silent and do not use voice or camera flash actions. The provisions in the Constitution around the timing of breaks will apply to this meeting. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop is in this room. So now to introductions. I'll now ask members of the committee and attending officers to introduce themselves, starting with the person who is on my right.
Good evening, Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
Carl Powling, Conservative, Mersey and Pyfleet Ward.
Sam Clay, Newtown, Christchurch.
Councillor Roger Mannion, Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Catherine Bickersteth, Highwoods Ward.
Councillor Jeremy Hagan, Stanway Ward.
Councillor Roger Buston, Prettygate Ward.
Councillor David King, Mile End.
Councillor Tim Young, Greenstead Ward, subbing for Councillor Dave Harris.
Councillor Molly Bloomfield, Greenstead Ward.
Sarah White, Licensing Team Leader.
Andrew Tyrrell, in my first week as Head of Public Protection.
Thank you very much. So on to item 2, substitutions. And as you said, Councillor Tim Young, you are substituting for Councillor Dave Harris. And we have apologies from Councillor Spindler. Item 3, urgent items. And I don't believe there are any urgent items. Thank you very much. So on to item 4. I'd now like to ask if any councillors have any declarations of interest. The councillors must publicly announce the item number, whether the interest is disclosable, pecuniary. Yes.
Thanks, Chair. It's not a declaration of interest, but Councillor McLean, Bickersteth, Bloomfield and I are all wearing something green tonight because it's 6 years for the anniversary of Grenfell. And I'm sure we all remember that incident. It was horrific, and I wonder if it would be appropriate, Chair, just to have a short period of silence to remember the victims of Grenfell before we carry on with our business tonight.
Thank you for that. Yes, I agree. I think that would be very appropriate. And Matt, if you could take control of that time, thank you. Would a minute be appropriate? Thank you very much. So moving now on to item 5, I'd like to invite the committee to confirm as a correct record of minutes of the Licensing Committee held on the 22nd of March and the 24th of May.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. So moving swiftly on to item 6, have your say. Do we have any have your say speakers with us this evening? That's nice and easy. Okay. Item 7. I'd like to hand over to Sarah to give us a licensing update, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I should first start off by just informing the committee that there have been a few changes in our team, in our team, in fact, over the last year. So the licensing update, we've been largely reactive. So we lost our licensing. We didn't lose her, we know where she went. One of our licensing officers went as a licensing manager to one of the neighbouring authorities, and John Ruder left the council in February. So we've been dealing with urgent work and complaints that have come in since that time largely. We have managed to do a few pieces of significant work. One of those is the introduction of the NR3 register, which is the National Register of Refusals, Revocations and Suspensions for taxi drivers, which now means that the council checks all new drivers and all renewals against the register to make sure they haven't been registered elsewhere and revoked or refused anywhere else. And we, in the process of uploading all our historical revocations and refusals onto the register, going back for 11 years. So that work, that upload is almost complete. We haven't quite finished that, but we hope to finish that in the next week or so. So that's a significant piece of work that we've done. Aside from that, we have largely been dealing with quite a number of complaints. We've done some work. Obviously, members will be aware with the card payment devices. We've been working to establish our processes on the new council system that we use Assure, the new back office system. That's been quite a considerable amount of work, and we've done quite a lot of cleansing of licences and updating of information and making sure that our records are correct. So that's taken quite a lot of time. We've been attending some information sessions on Martin's Law, which may come to the council this year. We're not really sure. This detail is still being worked out by the government, but if and when we get any more information on that, we will bring it back to the committee. So we've done some of that work. We've done a little bit on data protection in relation to CCTV and taxis, and again, I would imagine that we will revisit some of that work in the forthcoming year. I think that's probably about all we've done, really. It's been very reactive. At times there's just been 2 officers, so we've done the best we can. But we're looking forward to the new licensing manager joining us. The interviews have taken place and the position has been offered, but we're yet to know if that's confirmed.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to hand over to the committee for any comments or questions. That was nice and quick. I do have a question. You mentioned, Sarah, about the cleansing of licences. Can you give a little bit more detail about that, please?
Yes, we migrated a huge amount of information from a previous back office system into a new back office system, and we've been just looking at the integrity of that data and just making sure that it's correct and that we are populating what we need to populate on the website. And there's just a huge amount of work concerning that. So we spent a lot of time on that across the board with licensed premises, taxis. It's consumed quite a lot of time.
I have another question, Sarah. I just wanted to know the post that's been offered. When would that likely be to start?
Ideally, we'd like to have them start in about 6 weeks.
Thank you. I think all the updating of all the taxi drivers' records is a great move, and it can only keep our residents even safer, which is a really good thing. So thank you for all that work. That's wonderful. If there's nothing else, we'll go back to have your say. So if I could invite you to take a seat, if you could present your name to us. And then once you turn the microphone on and start talking, you have 3 minutes to have your say. And then a buzzer or a ding will go off after 2 minutes, just to give you an idea. You've got 1 minute left. Okay.
I'm the secretary of Colchester Hackney Carriage Association. My name is Mustafa Irshad. Actually, I came here to discuss to raise two issues relate to Hackney Carriage Association. The first issue, which has been discussed very much, about the marshals down here on High Street rank. In the first meeting when we took over the association, we raised this issue that there are no marshals down here on High Street, especially on weekend nights, Friday night and Saturday nights. After that, for 2 weeks marshals were there, and again there weren't any marshals over there for the drivers. And the issue is because when there is no marshals, there is no management for the people to handle how they can, because we can't come out to make them queues or tell them that how you're gonna get the taxi, because it's written over there the taxi must be taken from the top of the rank, but every time people are just down at the bottom end and they are taking taxis. Because of that, all the drivers are queuing up at the back out of the rank because they can't get in, and there is always a block of road. This is the one issue. Second issue was raised, I think so, that there's an overcharging issue. The overcharging issue hasn't been addressed so far, and we have received many complaints about the drivers they are overcharging. For that, I have one suggestion that why we should not put a list of sort of a fares for the towns or cities from Colchester to where their customer want to go, or we can put a list of a fare on mile based over the rank, so the customer can check over there when they are going to their home, so they can check that. Suppose from Braintree, if they are going from here, they know that how many it's gonna cost at the time when they're gonna leave from here to there, an estimated cost I'm talking about. Or we can put, I have already made on my computer as well, on my phone as well, that we can made a mile based, so the customer can check from himself that on the phone how many miles you're gonna travel and how much it's gonna be the fare. These are the two issues I was talking about, that we can discuss this, and it will help for the betterment of the trade as well. That's all for today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If you'd like to stay where you are, I'd just like to pass over to the committee if you have any comments that you'd like to raise. Yes, councillors.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like the officers may want to respond to the second element. The first element about the taxi marshals, my understanding was that they were funded by ATIC. Now that ATIC is closing, that may be an issue for us. So I think we ought to look maybe working with Colback and others, Colchester Business Against Crime, because it is an issue, especially at weekends when it's a free-for-all unless there are marshals in place. And I think we're all well aware of that. If any of us, I've done weekends, night time with the SOS bus and the street pastors, and it can be chaos unless the marshals are in place. So my belief is they were funded by ATIC. I think that's the case. Officers may be able to confirm that. We have got an issue if we know ATIC is closing, we don't know what's going to come in its place. So I think we need to work with others to put something in place to make sure there is some marshalling, especially on Friday and Saturday nights. The other issue, I'll leave officers and other members to comment on if they wish.
I think that's a really good point, actually, Councillor Young, about making sure that we work in collaboration with. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back on Councillor Young's comment, there was a press article dated 1st of June regarding the potential closure of Attic nightclub, that actually they'd had conversations with the landlords and they were staying open. So perhaps there's a conversation to be had to see if they are willing to continue the funding.
That sounds like a good idea. Is that something that we could facilitate, Sarah?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we are alive to the issue of attic closing because Councillor Young is quite right. They do provide a marshal for the rank. The bid have also provided a marshal, and I think that might be what's been referred to by the gentleman. So we are aware of the issues and aware of the impact of attic closing on that, and there have been some conversations at officer level about what we do and engaging with the bid around that and the nighttime economy. So that's very much in our sight and something that we're looking at. I don't have any definite answers on that at this point, but it is definitely something that we are aware of. We've also been looking at signage for the rank to encourage how we encourage people to keep, you know, to go to the front and not queue at the back, and that's something that's been ongoing, but not particularly swiftly, I'm afraid. In relation to the second issue of overcharging, we do investigate where this is reported to us. Actually, we get a lot of anecdotal second-hand complaints about overcharging, but we don't get that many people who come to us and claim to have been overcharged. Where we do, we investigate. We have done test purchasing, and that is something that we very much hope that we will get back to once we're up to full strength, which will hopefully be in the next couple of months, and we will be looking to test purchase across the variety. Clearly, we don't advertise the results of that test purchasing. We deal with the individuals, you know, as you would expect. We would deal with that, but we wouldn't necessarily tell people what we did. We can certainly look at the suggestion that's been made about publishing things. My initial reaction is these are Hackney carriages. The charge is what is metered. But if the committee is minded to ask us to look for that, we can certainly look at the suggestions that have been made and bring back a report on that to the committee.
Is that something that generally the committee feel that would be a good idea to do? It sounds like it might alleviate any anxiety from your point of view as you're working, stops arguments. So can we request that then, please, Sarah, that you could do that? Thank you. I think actually it was Roger next, possibly.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you very much indeed. I certainly agree with everything that's been said so far. I was going to actually ask that we could hear from Sarah as to what the officers' views are, and I think she's presented those extremely succinctly, and thank you for that. The point that was raised in regard to marshals, we do need to make it a little bit more obvious. We don't have the same problem with bus stops, do we? People are ready and able and willing to queue at bus stops, and they know which end to queue at. I can't see any logical reason why we couldn't do exactly the same for taxi ranks, and we don't have that many around the town. That's not to say that marshalling isn't necessary for folk, particularly on weekends, and I think the idea of seeing if Attic will step back up to the plate will be a good thing. But I don't think it would do any harm to investigate the idea of having a sign or sign saying taxis queue here. Once people get used to what they have to do, then they'll do it. We never, as I say, we never have problems in bus stops, do we? Secondly, the overcharging issue. I believe there is actually a charging schedule, is there not? No. And that charging schedule is the one we need to work to, and it's worked to via the meter, is it not? The question is, how does one display all of this information, and there's a lot of it, in a brief and digestible form to a customer who perhaps on a weekend might have had too many sherbets and wouldn't be paying too much attention to it. So that's something we would need to bear in mind. In other words, the practicalities of actually doing it. But the secret shopper point, I think, should give some comfort to the association that the council does take those points seriously, because the trade has to represent the town, and if the trade gives the wrong impression of the town, then our guests and visitors will not receive the attention that we want them to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. Very good point. I think the idea of signs encouraging new visitors to our city, which we are obviously trying to do as a new city, it would be, and if they're not familiar with where you queue on our high street, those signs would be very welcome, I think. Councillor Bickerstaffe.
Yes, you just touched on the point I was going to make about visitors. With Colchester being a city who wants to encourage visitors from across the nation as well as from other countries, I think the transparency in fares is something which would be very welcome. I know many other countries do, for example, not just for the centre of the city, but when you're at the North Station, for example, people, travellers, would be really useful to know an estimate, what would it cost to get a taxi to the city centre. So I think anything which will help make it easier for visitors to use the city would be welcomed, and signage.
Are we in agreement generally as a committee that that's a great way forward? Thank you. There was something else as well, Sarah. Might you be able to feedback when you have more information about marshals and the situation?
Yeah, certainly we can bring that back, yes.
Lovely. So you now have another minute if you wanted to feed back to us with anything. You'd like to turn your
Sorry, yeah. Thanks for your feedback, exactly. I would, I forgot who said that it is quite difficult that we can display the fares, how it gonna be from one point to another point. Means why we should not do an experiment that if one of the colleagues said that, gentleman said that they are really drunk and it will be really difficult for them to find out how they can know that how much it is from city center to another one. Like if we have seen on the bus stops, there is a display. So if we made a display like this, that from this city center to another city center is gonna cost between a range from 40 to 45, depending on the time what they are traveling, that's going to be beneficial for them as well. It is not, means I have worked over there as well. It's not every time that they are really drunk, so they cannot understand what they are quite in a position that they know that how much they have paid, what note they have given. They are quite, means most of them, I can understand that one or two are in a position they can't control themselves. But yes, we can do two things, like on the bus stop there is a big box with a fare, and so we can do them with the start of this, so it will help to reduce the complaints about the fare charging.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming today, and I'm sure those comments are all noted. Thank you.
Thanks for the feedback.
I just wanted to go back to item 7. I was supposed to let people know that the recommendation was for the report to be noted, so that's noted. Thank you. So we are now on to item 8, which is licensing committee training. I shall hand over to Sarah.
Thank you, Chairman. Some of the longer standing members of the licensing committee will probably remember that the licensing committee training requires currently for members to observe some meetings before they're able to sit. It was put in place quite some time ago now. I think it was about 2008. You might have said in that report, I think it was 2008. Because it was a new process, the Licensing Act came in, it was unusual, it wasn't embedded within the council's sort of the way it operated. It was felt useful for members to do that. The situation's kind of moved on now, and we're a little bit, we're finding it's a problem to get members through the training and to observe, because the number of Hackney Carriage appeals in particular, but also the number of Licensing Act appeals has dropped significantly, meaning there's a considerable delay in getting members trained, because they can't sit, because they can't see a committee, can't sit on can't attend a committee to see what happens. And we also now obviously record our hearings, so there's a body of evidence now for people to look back on. So we're suggesting that we remove this from the training requirement to enable us to get members trained much quicker. The training will remain that members must be trained before they sit. That's a basic requirement. And then we will deliver specific training if anything changes. I imagine if Martin's Law comes in, for example, we would offer members a training session on that, and anything else that's a significant change, we would still update all members on that. But to remove this requirement for observation, just to enable us to speed up the training and get members able to sit much quicker, Chairman, that's the suggestion.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I pass over to the committee for any thoughts or feedback? Councillor Buston.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, what Sarah says is absolutely right. And generally it's been Matthew that's actually had the problem of trying to sift out the number of people over the last 2 or 3 years who will actually come and sit on the appeal meetings, and a number of people here have sat at the appeal meetings, which are actually very, very important because they can affect people's livelihoods. So they're actually extremely important to be properly trained in order to undertake them. Just a point mentioned by Jeremy, my colleague to my left here, I think it's important for us to know and remember that we cannot, the council is not allowed at the moment to train everybody to be substitute members as we do on planning. Licensing and planning are two completely separate entities, although they both have a sort of semi-quasi-judicial function. Licensing is different. In order for you to be able to sit on an appeal, which is arguably more far-reaching for many people as individuals than planning ever will be, you actually have to undertake specific training, and you have to be a member of the licensing committee. So in other words, it's got to be drawn from within our number. So that immediately shrinks the available pool of councillors to do that, which is why it is so important that people actually put themselves forward to be both trained and, if you can, watch and attend other appeal meetings that may have been held either in this authority or from others. I'm sure there's video evidence available that we could show to people, but it is so important, and it is important because you can affect people's livelihoods. If you take their licence plate away from them, they have lost their income and their livelihood. So it's very important that what we do is done effectively and properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I totally agree. Training is absolutely imperative because of that very point. Councillor Young.
Yeah, obviously I'm subbing tonight, but I've been a member of the licensing committee for the last three or so years, and I agree with everything Councillor Buston has said. It is important that members of the committee are trained, but I think it makes sense to do away with to make people observe a hearing report, although it would be preferable, I think, you know, given the pool and given the reasoning in the report, it makes sense not to insist on that in future. And of course, as Councillor Buston well knows, these are usually daytime meetings, the hearings, which rules out people who work full time and they can't get the time off to attend. So it's an even smaller pool in that case. I mean, we're lucky to have Councillor Harris, Councillor Buston, who can usually make themselves available. I did a few, but I think members should be aware that they are daytime meetings. The training is very good, and the support we get from both the licensing officers and our legal team is also excellent as well. So, yeah, and these are making important decisions, usually about people's livelihoods and communities, and it's very important that we get the decisions right and that the members of the committee are well trained and well informed. But I can see the reasoning for the recommended decision, and I'm very happy to support it, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to contribute? Okay, thank you. So the recommended decision is that the training scheme for members of the licensing committee be amended to require all licensing committee members to undertake licensing specific training when first appointed to the committee, and thereafter any training that may be deemed necessary from time to time for the effective delivery of the council's statutory licensing functions, and the requirement for members of the licensing committee to observe a hearing before being appointed as a member of a subcommittee or driver appeal panel be removed. Do I at this point ask for people to show favour? Could you please indicate if you agree? Beautiful show of hands, thank you very much. So moving on to item 9, and this is the Licensing Committee Work Programme 2023 to 2024, and I shall hand over to Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the standard report which is presented to every meeting of the committee. Normally, it will be populated with proposed business for the committee for the forthcoming year. This year it isn't, for the reasons that Sarah has already touched on. So This is the report. I know Sarah's referenced a couple of things that will be coming back to committee, but at this stage, I wonder whether, unless there's any input from officers, whether the committee has any suggestions that it wishes to make or things that it might like to see coming forth in the work programme going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hand over to the committee. Councillor Buston.
Thank you. I've not been promoted to being a consultant just yet. One thing I would say is that although it doesn't appear in the work schedule, we actually have to undergo as an authority a regular review of all the licensing policies that we have, and there is a schedule of these, and they are slowly worked through on a rotational basis to make sure that we always keep the authority up to speed. So although the work programme looks empty, it's actually de facto not empty. There are the regular things that the officers have to do all the time just to keep us up to speed. Where our input comes in, and items that we request to be put on the programme generally come from things that have almost, if you like, come from the floor, and problems that we encounter during the year that are in addition to those standard menu items. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else like to contribute?
I think we might be looking at this year.
Yes, please.
So I think there's an outstanding issue on CCTV and licensed vehicles, which we will bring back at some point. I should just caveat that, as I have touched on before, the new licensing manager will hopefully be in post within the next 2 months. So we'll have a much better idea once he is in post, or they are in post, I should say. So CCTV and licensed vehicles, the Licensing Act policy, we really do with a refresh. We did have a look at it not that long ago, but we are in a post-COVID world, and although I wouldn't say we know what that really looks like, I think we need to start shaping something around the licensing policy and the vision for the city. So we would at least kick that work off, even if we don't conclude it this year. Again, as I mentioned, Martin's Law, it may come this year. We're still very unsure, but if it does, then we will certainly bring something back to the members on that. I attended a recent meeting of the Joint Licensing Officers Forum for Essex last week, and there's a feeling that perhaps we should look at taxi policies across Essex. Now, I think we're fairly comfortable with ours, but with cross-border working, we would certainly benefit from making sure we align with other Essex authorities where it's appropriate to do so. So that may come back. That work will possibly be dictated by the pace of work within Essex on that matter. And then safeguarding, which is, I don't know if members are aware, but we've, as a licensing team, we've joined with our colleagues in sort of community safety. And safeguarding is a broad term, but there is some pieces of work across licensing that we could do with looking at in terms of safeguarding. So we're looking, all our premises are pretty much up to speed in terms of the DPS, and premises licence holders are aware of their Ask Angela and the various things that we have in place in the borough. We're possibly looking to extend that into the late night refreshment houses, the places that are open really late when the pubs and clubs shut. There's a role there. Quite how we do that and what we do, we haven't really given that much thought yet. Again, it's a piece of work we're keen to look at, but we'll need shaping once we've got a manager in place. But I would anticipate bringing something back to members on that at some point in conjunction with our colleagues in community safety.
Thank you. I like the idea of looking into what we do with late night premises that are open late and how we protect our residents through some strategies that we introduce. That would be great. Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to contribute? Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be really interested, and it's implied in part of what Sarah said, if we were to look at what we count as good practice elsewhere. Now, this is within a legal framework, of course, but we nonetheless, I suspect, have some significant choices. And I'll be interested in knowing what we think those are, what counts as success, and without making a meal of it. And that must include how it feels for those who have a licence then provide that service. So I'm interested if we could have a look around that axle of improvement, really, without, as I say, killing ourselves. Just test where we are, where others are going, if there's anything else we should do. Thank you.
Kind of like a benchmarking to see what other councils do.
Absolutely, Chair.
And it would also be, I totally agree, I think it'd also be really interesting to canvass the opinions of our own residents as well in some way to see what they feel is needed and how we can best support them. Perhaps, what are your thoughts on that? Sarah?
Sorry, just I didn't turn it off. In terms of safeguarding, and do you mean
in terms
or
of
just generally?
In terms of strategies that you might put in place, like the Ask Angela, but I think you were suggesting that there might be something else that you do for later night venues. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, as I say, it's an initial thought within the team at the moment, and we haven't really done any sort of scoping of it at all. So we can take, you know, everything that's said here into that and consider it all and use the expertise of our colleagues in community safety, because as I say, it's a very new formation together. So we're getting into partnership, working with them, but there's still, you know, we still need to understand exactly what they can provide us and what we can tell them and work something out together, Chairman.
Brilliant. I look forward to hearing more about that. That sounds interesting. Thank you. Is there anything anybody else would like to contribute? Okay, well, I think that concludes the business of the committee for this evening, and I declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much for coming and good night.